Well, it's time again to check in with State Senator Drew MacEwen. Drew, how are you doing?
I am good. Thanks for having me, Jeff. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Been a couple weeks since we've checked in. You've been very busy on the Senate floor and in committees and things like that. We're starting to see bills move kind of around and people are talking about them more. I definitely want to get into law enforcement. I met with the sheriff this past week and we talked about some things that are moving through the legislature. But first, I wanted to ask you, because you're an old Navy guy. So, what's going on the waterways of Washington? Tell me about where we're at in ferry traffic and what the deal is. We've talked, I think, about moving to
Yeah.
electric ferries, where that might be the future, but that's not helping us right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So as people know, we've been at a crisis with our ferry system in this state for a number of years now, both from usable boats to crew issues, and being able to man them, and then that got exacerbated, frankly, by the pandemic and the previous administration, was very one directional in the type of ferries they want built in the future, and that was to have an electric, fully electric boat. Which, on one hand, there's some technology there for it, but not for the size of the ferries that we need. And then plus the changes you'd have to make to the landing docks, both in Seattle and in Bremerton and Bainbridge, and frankly throughout the Puget Sound at all of our ferry terminals. And there's been this struggle. There was a design build that went out, that basically said, "Here's money, go do it," and not a lot of sideboards to it. And we are nowhere close to being able to have a technology that's usable as that legislation demanded. So I'm pleased that the governor last week said, we need to change direction here, reverse course on this ship, and let's use what we have. And in the meantime, I'm pushing that we should be building additional diesel efficient boats while technology catches up, and we can then use the best available technology. But we're just not at that point today. So I'm pleased that the governor's made some executive decisions there to restore service. That's vital for our communities, and I represent part of Kitsap, and that's very vital for commuters up there and also for tourism. So we're going to see a pretty close to full restoration of that service come the summer. In the meantime, I'm going to continue to push that we contract out for some new diesel boats. They are efficient. They get the job done, and we don't have to make other massive infrastructure changes. And I think if we can continue to move in that direction, that's a good thing. We've also got to do a better job with our workforce. Many of them were let go and never brought back during the pandemic, and that was my opinion, that was a very wrong move to make. And we have struggled to maintain adequate crew sizes, and those are mandated by the Coast Guard. You can't just set sail with less crew than what the law requires, the federal law. We don't have any way around that, and so we've got to increase that pipeline as well. And I think this governor, we met last week. He's very open to cutting through the bureaucracy and doing more. You can't just hire somebody and stick them on a boat and say, go run it, right? There's a pipeline there, but we need to also be making those investment dollars go to work there.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of bureaucracy and what that means for an average citizen as you hear that word, you may not fully
Sure.
understand it. When it comes to a bill I saw, and it might have been through the House, but regardless, it was like a secondary check on a home or some sort of issue when it came to medical. Maybe it was a foster home or so. Anyways, regardless, the state would come in, they would do one check on the thing, and then there would be basically another part of the government would come do the same exact check and come up with almost with the same results. And so I
Right.
think what is that kind of the bureaucracy that you're looking at, the governor's looking at too, like cutting down on these multiple visits for those types of issues, or what does that mean to
Yeah.
the average?
Yeah, the word bureaucracy gets thrown out a lot, and oftentimes in a negative nature. When I say it with a negative tone, I'm referring to the inefficiencies of government and how much redundancy, kind of like the example you just gave, that can often be there. And look, we have hardworking state workers. I'm by no means diminishing that. Oftentimes, the problems with the bureaucracy is that we create rules and sideboards, and we make various departments and agencies adapt to those, and so then they all come up with their own individual ways of doing things and don't talk to each other oftentimes. And so you end up with these redundancies. You see this with transportation projects all the time, with anything construction related that the state gets involved in, where you're always asking for, hey, bring me this rock, and then, oh, bring me another rock, and then I need a rock from over there. And it's terribly inefficient. Governor Ferguson, again, I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised by his approach and his attitude, as he's taken office here, that we need to cut that out. We need to be efficient. And a lot of times, though, the inefficiencies we do see in the state government and within the bureaucracy is a result of crappy legislation, just to be perfectly blunt. The legislature has a tendency to punt on really drilling down on when it creates policy and how that policy should be implemented. And oftentimes a bill will get passed and it'll direct whichever. I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's just use transportation. We're gonna build XYZ, and we tell DOT, okay, and then go create rules to implement. We do that all the time. The legislature does, and that creates that inefficiencies too. And so this legislature really needs to reassert its authority in when it implements policy, to have drilled down on the majority of those rules and how things get implemented. And we've seen this at the federal level as well. And this was a result, frankly, of the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court ruling on the Chevron case, that Congress had punted its legislative authority as well, and had given too much to unelected individuals running various departments and agencies. And that power really rests with the elected officials, and that's where it should be. So legislature is partially responsible on that as well. But I think that this administration at the state level is very focused and acutely aware that we have got to do a better job with efficiencies in state government. And again, we're fiduciaries of the taxpayer dollars. I say that all the time. And we should make sure that we're doing that to the best of our ability in an efficient manner.
You bring up the federal government, and as you're talking about this example, I'm thinking back, 25 years ago to those events on 9/11, right? When we, at kind of that after action report, we found out that none of the mains were talking to each other, and they were all kind of just going down their own little pathway, when the collaboration could have not only saved a lot in information sharing, but definitely fiscally as well. It's amazing.
Yeah, there was actually a federal law pre 9/11 that prevented the CIA and the FBI from sharing intelligence with each other. There are some legitimate reasons for that, because you don't want the CIA involved in domestic issues, and there's a legitimacy there. But the law was too stringent, and they weren't able to share that information. And then the other thing we saw out of 9/11, and it took decades. We saw this same issue with the Oso landslide. 8 years ago, I believe it was, where communications between first responders weren't using the same equipment, the same frequencies, and there was just a total breakdown there. And that, I think at the state level, we've resolved that, and I think it's been largely resolved at the federal level. But yeah, it's unfortunate sometimes to have major incidents occur to shed light on those types of things that, frankly, shouldn't have been there.
I remember talking to Sheriff Salisbury at the time, as well as the State Patrol, and they came on, I think, together, and we were talking about it. And go, yeah, well, our walkies don't talk to the same frequency, and it was just mind-boggling.
Yes.
Sticking with law enforcement, I met with Sheriff Sperling, current Sheriff Sperling in Mason County this past Friday, after a lunch and learn that was out there in Hoodsport, and the citizens out there brought up this issue that I see in being brought up by him, but also brought up in Thurston County by Sheriff Sanders. And this is the ability, or perhaps the non-ability, of voters in the counties to elect their sheriff of record. And we had heard from Sheriff Sperling that it had moved. This is, I think, moved through the House and moving rather quickly. What are some of the thoughts there on your side in the Senate?
Yeah, so we'll see if it gets over here to the Senate. I hope it doesn't. And again, this vilification of law enforcement has got to stop. It really does, because who wants to go into a career in a field that's constantly being vilified? And what that bill does is it allows for an unelected situation to occur, to put in place a sheriff when people might not like the current one. We have an election process. I don't want to go to a system where you have a non-elected sheriff. There are situations, there are counties that have the ability to do that. I believe the King County has that situation, but they chose that, right? It wasn't forced upon them. I think it's vital that an elected official has the authority and the means to carry out the duties of their office. If the voters don't like the way that happens, they have the opportunity to replace them, and that's how that system should be. Having something that's extrajudicial outside of that creates a whole host of issues. And well, and frankly, ironically, I think it ends up politicizing it. And yeah, that sounds ironic to say that because it's an elected position. But when you have non-electeds then making those decisions, there and enters in a whole nother element. And I don't want to get to that. It's important and it's vital that sheriffs are elected by the people that they're sworn to protect and serve, and that the people have the recourse, not some other mechanism.
It was a whole host of topics brought up by the citizens there, a lot of folks kind of from the Lake Cushman area, and they also were talking about a issue, again, kind of public safety related. We're not having enough funding to be able to cover, and it's not just the law enforcement part of this. It's having enough prosecutors. It's having
Right.
enough jail space. It's not having enough of the folks on the defenders side to be able to public defenders, being limited by the amount of cases they can do. So when it comes to like the overall, and this is a huge topic, of course, but the overall justice of in the state, where is the Senate landing? What are the Senate Republicans doing to kind of bring more light to this?
Yeah, so Senator Jeff Holy, who's a Senate Republican, represents part of the Spokane area. He's a former law enforcement officer. He's also an attorney, and he's been working closely with Governor Ferguson on legislation to create some significant grants to boost our law enforcement numbers. We rank dead last in the nation on a per capita basis on the number of law enforcement officers we have. That has to change, but again, money alone doesn't solve it. And I've said this time and again, for 5 years at least, law enforcement in this state's been vilified by by the opposite party, frankly, in the legislature. Legislation was passed that made it incredibly difficult to do their job, and that has created a recruitment problem. You can have all the grants you want, but if people don't want the job, that's a whole nother issue. So I'm glad that Senator Holy is moving forward and working with the governor on that. But the other side of that equation is we've got to stop that vilification. And we do. I mean, this is hard to say, right? We don't have enough lawyers. I mean, who would have thought that would have ever happened? But it's true, and especially on the public defense side, our Constitution enshrines the principle of innocent until proven guilty. And we also with the Miranda ruling, people are entitled to defense, and so somebody that is charged with a crime, if they can't afford it, they have the right to have an attorney, and we do not have enough public defenders. There's a case working its way through right now. The state Supreme Court is expected to issue a ruling this month that could, on the surface, it sounds good, but it's going to create more problems where it's actually going to limit significantly the caseload that a given public defender can take on, which makes sense on one hand, but on the flip side, then what do you do with that's going to create even more of a backlog. So there's a number of things we've got to do. I was actually working on some legislation to address this, but I hit the pause button because we've really got to see what the court rules on this issue, because that could have significant implications and might need to do a 180 on how we write that legislation. So stay tuned on that issue. But that is a big issue. And, and again, recruitment for people to run our jails. That's another item. We've got you've got capacity issues there. So there's a whole host of things that the proverbial can got kicked for a number of years, and here we are, and we've got to work diligently to solve those issues. And the county prosecutor and law enforcement across the board are tasked with enforcing and carrying out state law, as has been enshrined by the legislature and signed into law by various governors. And so they are an extension of state government. And we've got a role to play in that and making sure that the resources are there. Counties certainly need to be funding their own sheriff's departments and jails. But we've also got to make sure that the right resources are there for public defense. And we can do things to help jail capacity through the capital budget, et cetera. So we've got to be better partners all the way around on this issue.
When it comes to the budget and the various budgets throughout the state here, I have seen numbers now between 10 and then I feel like I saw somebody send out an email that say the budget deficit may be close to $16 billion. I don't know if that was accurate or not, but regardless, it's a huge sum of money. And while the monies are still coming in at a pretty healthy clip, it's not outpacing the deficit. So where are we at now with these types of things? What are the types of steps that you guys are advocating for as these budgets are starting to take a little better shape?
Yeah, and the reason you continue to see this fluctuation in numbers because it depends who you talk to.
Right.
And what's driven, and I think this is a key point, what's driven this issue on the budget issue is that the Democrat majority over the last number of years created significant wish list of programs and things that they want to do, and an increase in spending and then to justify it, they assumed extraordinary revenue growth that was just outside the realm of reality, and so that has all come home to roost in a major bow wave. And this is not a budget situation where we're in because we have a lack of revenue. It's a budget situation that we're in because there's way too much spending. Spending has outpaced the growth of our budget. We have record revenues in the state and continue to do so. Senate Republicans will be releasing a budget soon that does not involve cuts and does not involve tax increases. The way the budget has been done over the last number of years, and Governor Ferguson spoke directly to this, and frankly, ticked off a lot of people in his own party, but he was right. And that was there was unrealistic budgets passed for the last number of biennium, and that has all come home to roost. And you've got to change. When we met with him last week, he specifically said, I don't want to go through this exercise every 2 years. None of us do, right? So it's important that this gets done right. I'll shout out to him again, to the governor, that he had the courage, the political courage to go out and propose significant cuts in the budget. Is it enough to get us all the way home on the budget process? I think there's still more work to be done there. That's fair to say, but it's a start in the right direction. That frankly, again, the previous administration never proposed a cut. When it came to budgeting, it was always increased spending, increased taxes, and increased fees.
Where do you think that different mindset comes from the governor, the current governor now? Is it because he kind of was the head of the, as the AG and kind of the judicial side, so he was keenly aware of maintaining a budget within his department, or is it how he comes to the office based on his background, or where do you see the major change in that one?
Well, I think there's two things there. Former Governor Inslee came to the state out of Congress, and Congress has a spending problem.
Yeah.
So I think that was enshrined in him for a number of years. So there's that. But Governor Ferguson, he shared this story, and I think that this probably is the answer to your question, and that is when he first got into politics, got elected to the King County Council 20-some years ago. Similar but different budget situation. The point is that they had to make significant approaches, change their approaches to how the county budget was done. And King County has a significant budget. It's not anything to scoff at all. And I think for anybody, regardless of party, to go into office and get thrust into that, I think that kind of sets your mindset and your tone for how you govern in general. So I think him having to have done that probably laid a lot of the groundwork. And I think he's just more realistic when it comes to economics and what can and cannot be achieved in a given time frame.
Huh, very interesting. Let's see. Those were the topics that I wanted to cover on that one. Did you have anything else to give a shout out to the 35th, or what else you were working on?
I'm going to be meeting with Dan and Travis later today. We're going to chat on capital budget things. We've done well working together to conquer and divide when it comes to the capital budget. So we all are advocating for different things, and then force the other chamber to buy off on everything. So, on the capital budget side, I think we'll see some good things for the 35th. We've still got a few days left here of floor session before we revert to committee work and take on the other chambers' bills that they pass. But two big items that are before us. Unfortunately, last week the Senate passed unemployment insurance for striking workers.
I
I
saw
think that's
that. Yeah.
I think that's frankly a terrible piece of legislation. Unemployment insurance is designed to provide a safety net when you involuntarily lose your job through no fault of your own, and to now expand the program that for people that choose to go on strike, which is their right to do, but there's a consequence to everything, and that's going to have a huge social cost because it's going to get spread across the entire unemployment insurance risk pool. That you're going to see. I think it's not going to happen tomorrow, but over time, you're going to see significant changes. And you wonder why companies like Boeing open manufacturing facilities in other states. There's a consequence to this legislation, and I don't think that my friends on the other side realize the significance of what they passed in that legislation. The other big thing, we'll see if this
Hold
comes
on.
to a
Oh,
vote.
I do want to hear that next thing. But back to this. What percentage of the majority party's constituents do you think that that's a smart idea? Is it just the
Uh,
fringe on the, like, they say you for the primary voters, or is, because that does not come
yeah,
across as a general plurality,
right.
even,
Yeah, well, first the chair of the Senate Labor Committee, Senator Rebecca Saldana, who wonderful person. I get along with her great, but she has a very socialized view on labor issues, and takes a very heavy-handed approach, and that government should be involved in every aspect of labor, and I disagree with that, and but I think again, to answer your question there, that I think the Senate Democrats caucus has become very, very progressive. There aren't moderate Democrats left over there. There just aren't, and so I think they're speaking to the far progressive side of their party with this. They not this was not a party line vote. There were Senate Democrats that voted against it. And so I think that's key to point out there. So yeah, I think it's a very progressive stance that they've taken, and I think it's going to have significant financial and economic consequences to our state.
Okay. And then what was that last one you were going to mention?
Yeah, so this hasn't come to a vote yet. I'm sure hoping it doesn't, but this is a bill by Senator Frame to. Yeah, I can't even believe that we're going to say this, but that to early release of juvenile criminal defenders if they've committed less than 3 murders, that they would get out early. So if you do 1 or 2, that's okay, but at the 3rd one, then we're gonna draw the line, say you can't have early release. It just appalls me that we're gonna take that the Senator Frame and progressive Senate Democrats are going to take that stance that it's okay to do up to 3 or less than 3, and you can have early release as a juvenile offender, but yet they turn around and pass bills that further criminalize gun owners who are operating within the law. But then we'll turn around and do this. And 2 years ago we saw legislation introduced in the House to decriminalize drive-by shootings. You know what? Can we just, as a state, and this gets back to the whole law enforcement thing, I would like this state to get back to where we make crime illegal again. Can we do that? It's incredulous to me that there's this movement to decriminalize everything and then wonder why we have problems.
I heard, and I talked to Representative Griffey, I think last week or 2 weeks ago. He was mentioning some of the bills that he's been working on sexual assault survivors and
Yeah,
things like that, and how they will take into account some of the, like, if a victim spoke on a certain aspects of this thing, like they really take that into account when it comes to either adding to or reducing the sentencing on that one. So you would think in that bill that you're talking about, the family or the impacted individuals around the person who was murdered would have some sort of a say,
right.
or even just law enforcement it doesn't have to be necessarily the law enforcement of the sheriff or the cop who brought the guy down, but maybe like a collection of them and hear why that's such a bad idea.
Agreed completely. And I'll tell you, I am all for rehabilitation and giving people a second chance, but there are some lines that get crossed where you have forfeited at least that opportunity for a second chance. You can have a second chance within prison, and I think we need to do a better job also within our prison systems to re-educate and help people, get a solid footing. I forget the exact number, so don't hold this to me. I want to say it's something like 85% of people in prison are out within 5 years. A lot of them are lesser crimes, and we've got to make sure that we're setting those people up for success, and so that there isn't the recidivism. But I'm sorry, you commit murder, especially crimes against children. There are some things that it's those opportunities to reenter society should be very far and few between. And I commend Representative Griffey and Couture. They do the yeoman's work, especially on the sex crimes issue and the children's issues when it comes to these things.
Yeah, they're working hard over there in the House, and I'll talk with them later this week as well to see what they've got bubbling up there too. State Senator Drew MacEwen, good to talk with you. drewmacEwen.src.wasstateleg.org. I'll put the link. That's a lot of words in there. Thank you so much for your time today, and I know you're a busy guy, so we'll check in down the road whenever we can.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Jeff. Good to see you.
Good to see you.